Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. My name is Ben Jackson. I'm back to host this one. Unfortunately, Joris had a bit of an accident over the weekend. He's all fine, but it didn't sound like a good one. So wishing you a speedy recovery, Joris. Scott didn't have an accident. Scott's still here, enjoying the sunny weather, getting into his summer mode. But we've still got a week left, Scott, so the summer can't really begin in earnest just yet.
No, it cannot. We're reaching, boiling point. As far as the football's concerned, best of wishes to our Joris. He came off a bike, didn't he?
Very Belgian.
We should very Belgian. But it was a mountain bike, not the bike that you might imagine. But he's hurt himself and needs to recuperate a little bit. So hopefully he'll be feeling a little bit better come this time next week when there'll be plenty to discuss. So you get a bit more of us this week.
Yeah, exactly. And we just wanted to put that out there so people don't think he's ducking the podcast, obviously, with Genk season having kind of petered out. He's not signed in and said, no, that's it, I'm done. He will hopefully be back next week to chat about the end of the season, although we'll then have another couple of games left because it just keeps going, doesn't it? But I'll quickly run through the results, and I think we've made an executive decision that we're just not going to talk about playoff 2 this week. We'll give you the results, but there's no point. We can kind of just we go around the house and talk about nothing that really matters. So Westerlo, they beat Leuven 2-0. Standard and Dender drew 0-0, and I just feel like that. Why'd you go watch any Standard Liège games for the rest of the way now? Do you know what I mean? Big game was on after that on Saturday night when Union travelled to Antwerp with potential sticking point that they struggled there in the past. They won 4-0. Club Brugge did what they needed to do. They beat Anderlecht by 3-1 in Brussels. Mechelen drew 1-1 with Charleroi, and then Genk beat Ghent by 4-1. So I think, Scott, we've got to start in Antwerp, really, with that game, that Union game against Antwerp. Obviously, Alderweireld's last game at home for Antwerp before he retires. It's just the irony that him and Vertonghen are going out at the same time when those two, their kind of careers at the international level at least, and at club level at times as well, have been just so kind of on a similar trajectory. Like everything's kind of gone quite similar for them in that sense. So it seems fitting that they're going off at the same time. Not that, he got to enjoy that much of the game because Union just kind of went through them, really. They were clinical on the kind of counter-attack as you'd expect. Less possession, but they just don't need it at this point. Fousseni scoring twice, El Hadj with 2 assists, Ivanovic from the spot, 3-0 at half-time. McAllister getting booked. That could be something we talk about next week. Obviously, that means he misses out on this one. But, got to the hour mark and you could tell Pocagnoli was like, right, let's just get some of these players off. Let's get them rested for next week. This one's done and dusted. Brings on Promise David, and Promise David then gets a goal as well. So it's kind of like, feels a bit unfair if you're Antwerp that, Fousseni scoring, David scoring. It's just, it feels kind of that there's like an inevitable feel about it, isn't it? Because you've got Fousseni scoring, you've got David scoring, you've got Ivanovic scoring, you've got all 3 of these guys now scoring goals as well. You got everyone chipping in, and they did what they need to do, and they did it comfortably. And if you're a Union fan watching that, you're like, I'm so glad you didn't kind of... Like, how many times do we see it when you get to this point of the season, teams like tighten up and it gets really kind of squeaky bum time? But that's the opposite squeaky bum time. That is like proper going for it and proper like doing your job and making sure there's absolutely no doubt that if you beat Ghent next week, you are the champions for the first time since 1935, which, my brother is in Brussels for work this week, and unfortunately he's not going to be there on Sunday because I was like, if you're there on Sunday, you're going to witness some fantastic party if they win. If they don't, then get out of the city as quick as possible because I think they'll be very, very depressed around the Duden Park area. But Scott, over to your thoughts on that one, and kind of, were you surprised about how comfortable it was for them, or did you kind of think, actually, no, this, even despite kind of the pressure that's now mounting on them, they've got what it takes to kind of deal with that?
Well, there was a little bit of chatter leading into this game about how the Bossel's not been the happiest of grounds for them to go to recently. If they were going to go anywhere and perhaps slip up before the final weekend, some people were suggesting statistically it was more likely to be here. I think the way realistically that they've been playing in the playoffs, I still felt it was unlikely. I think what was slightly surprising was how emphatic it was. but they were incredibly focused and driven, and the game was over pretty early, certainly over by half time, at 3-0. And we just saw the Union that we've seen right throughout these playoffs, a side that offensively are really strong, have been incredibly efficient in taking their opportunities, really, really defensively structured and really smart with their general all-round kind of game management. And yeah, focus and driven are the main words I would use. It was clear that they wanted to go out there and get it done early, which they did very effectively. But I think Club Brugge were probably watching this game hoping that something could happen from their perspective here, because nobody's really been talking about the final weekend. It's going to be another helicopter Sunday. I know some Union fans still have flashbacks and trauma from previous helicopter experiences, and they're hoping it doesn't go that way this weekend. I suppose it's probably worth mentioning, seeing as they're at home, to Ghent, a side who we'll talk about a little bit more shortly, who've had an absolutely a diabolical playoffs for a whole host of reasons. Also haven't beat Union Saint-Gilloise since they returned to the top flight. So there's a lot of things that makes this one, from the weird stat point of view, kind of interesting. Nobody really sees a shock coming, but the thing is, football's not predictable. Of course, it throws up odd things sometimes. So it's not over till it's over, as some people have been saying, and I think that's worth really remembering. Nobody's expecting Union to slip up, but yeah, it's not done till it's done, and that will be rammed home to them, I'm sure, over the next few days. In training as they prepare for this. But yeah, they were really, really good, and showed no signs of any nervousness at all, actually, which I think is the most worrying thing, both from a Ghent perspective, but also from a club perspective. And the sounds coming out of the club camp has really been about, I think, preparing their fans for disappointment, while saying, obviously, they're still hoping it goes their way. But yeah, there's very interesting signals coming out of their camp as well. I think from Antwerp's perspective, probably the only positive was Toby Alderweireld. Roberto Martinez turning up, a guest at the game for a pre-match presentation there, along with the families, getting a home farewell as well. That's probably the only positive to take from an Antwerp perspective, because they just really weren't able to cope with Union. They didn't deal with the transitions. They weren't strong enough in the duels, and they were just rolled over. Really, they were rolled over. And even Alex Muzio, who in recent weeks, Union's president, who's been looking noticeably very nervy during games for understandable reasons, as the tension builds week on week. His tension dissipated quite early this week, when it was obvious that the game was, heavily going in their favour, sitting enjoying the game with Tony Bloom, who was over to watch the game. And who knows, Tony's probably going to be at the Marion this coming weekend to see the climax of things as well, because history is just sitting there on their shoulder now. And everybody's kind of set them up for it. It's just worth highlighting how good they have been, though. I mean, really, really good. Buccagnoli's been talking a lot coming into the playoffs, and we've been talking about, too, his references to just being approaching the playoffs mentally prepared. My word, have they done that and then some, because they're on course for the best playoffs of any side ever. Which would be quite an achievement, not only, to go and win the title after 90 years, but to be the best playoff performance ever at a time when they've been so close in recent years. Would be like a massive kind of fuck you to the playoff system, I think, because it's the playoffs that have played quite a big part in them losing out in recent years as well. So there'd be an added sweetness, I think, to go and do it off the back of that while we still have the playoffs as well, and to set this, look, we got it done in the end. If they do, of course, I'm preempting things, but we did it by beating everybody else's record and setting the absolute playoff bar. A really sweet thing to do there. But yeah, they've been so good. They've been so good. Only conceded twice in the playoffs as well. So at both ends of the park, they've been really strong, which takes nothing away from Club, to be fair. They've had, and me and Joris were talking about this last week, if Club win, of course, this weekend and miss out still, they'll have bettered their playoff performance last season, which was outstanding. So they'll have exceeded their performance last year and still not managed to win it. And if they don't, it will probably come down to Union obviously getting those 4 out of 6 points against Club in the playoffs, and Club will be left, if they miss out, to look back on where they dropped points. I'm thinking of the St Truden game where they drew. There's a couple of games after Europe where they dropped points where arguably they probably shouldn't have. They'll be the kind of sliding doors moments they'll go away and analyse after that. But nothing but compliments for Union at the moment, and I think everybody expects. That's how I would describe this. So there's your build up.
I mean, when I saw that stat that Ghent hadn't beaten them since Union returned to the top flight, I was like, oh no, like that is, from me being a pessimistic football fan that I am, I see that sort of stat and it just gives me the shivers, gives me the creeps. I'm like, no, like it's going to be this bloody one time. They can't win a bloody game. They can't score. They can't do anything. And you watch Tom Vandenberg have the game of his life on Sunday afternoon. He is going to have one of the best games we're ever going to see from a goalkeeper. Like, that's my prediction. I just feel like if Union are going to do it, it's not going to be a 4-0 win like Antwerp. And like, hopefully, yeah, Alex is, I'm sure, listening, is probably like, great, Ben's cursed it, we're going to win like 6-0 and it's going to be the most comfortable game. And I hope it does go that way if it does. But you mentioned there about Club, and we'll get onto them a bit as well. But I think for the games to decide the title being the ones between these two in the playoffs, like, that is, for me, justifiably the way it should be. Like, that is how it should be. It should be the games between those two sides. Like, they've beaten everyone else. They're better than everyone else. It's between those two games. Union got the better of them. They win the title. Fair enough. Like, that's just the playoff system. If you want to keep it, that's how I feel like it should work. But then again, like you said, if Club just picked up a couple more points along the way, they would be in a different position. But it's mad, isn't it, that they've had such a good playoffs as well, but Union have just been better, and these two sides have really pushed each other. And I guess, kind of looking back, you can say that over the last couple of years, it has been Union that have pushed Club as like more times than often in kind of the regular season and stuff like that. So we can probably, like, once this kind of era is over, because these things go in cycles and stuff, we can say, yeah, those two sides, like, were really going at it during that time, and such different ways of doing things and different approaches to the game. But ultimately, it's been good for Belgian football, I think, that you've had these two going for it. And then Genk and Antwerp at different times, obviously being involved in the mix as well. At Antwerp, when they won it, that was a fantastic kind of final day. I don't think we're going to get that drama, because that is just, you could never even, you couldn't write it, sort of thing, isn't it? Like, there'd be like the football cliche of the script writers couldn't even get involved in that one. But yeah, I'm sure Tony will be there. Although, I mean, it's going to be hard to get a ticket. I mean, there'll be lots of people wanting them. I'm sure Alexander Blessing should be there. I feel like if anyone should be there, he should be allowed to come back in, because they were so close last year. He obviously delivered the cup, then goes back to Germany to manage St. Pauli, keeps them in the Bundesliga, so he did a great job there. But I feel like someone like that might be there. But the amount of people over the years that have had to wait for this moment, like, don't go near there if you're in Brussels on the weekend and you're not worried about football and don't care about football. Like, you shouldn't be within a couple of miles of the place, because there'll be people there that aren't getting in, that just want to be there. The clubhouse underneath the stadium, like, that's going to be absolutely rammed to start the game. The streets outside where all the pubs are, like, it is a fantastic place to go watch football. It's a fantastic kind of throwback to kind of a bygone era of football stadiums and stuff like that. And I think maybe it's, as you get older, you get kind of more, not necessarily nostalgic, because I wouldn't say it's something I grew up with, but you go to these stadiums like that, like even the Jan Breidel, I mean, it's completely falling apart and it's quite dilapidated, but there's something kind of nostalgically romantic about these old school stadiums that have seen a lot of history, and this is clearly one of them. And Sunday, it could see such history that it's been denied. It hasn't been able to see any kind of European football in recent seasons, but this moment, first time since 1935, I mean, I feel like we're already preempting something that I don't want to start preempting, because I feel like there might be another twist, and my prediction is Club are going to take an early lead and that's just going to suddenly throw everything out of kind of kilter. We're going to be like, are Union going to respond? Are they going to get that goal? Who's going to get that goal? And it's going to be Ross Sykes. I've already predicted it's going to be a Ross Sykes goal that wins them the title. But I'm really looking forward to it. And I mean, obviously Union with us, they reached out to us quite early when we started this podcast, and we've seen like the vision that Alex had and the club have had under Mazu, and it's just the way they transition every year. And I've just put a piece out on this for Get Football because I feel like I want people to understand that it's more than just kind of data and finding players in different places. And I think what Alex said to us, if you haven't listened to the special, like, it's still relevant to listen to now. Obviously, some of the stuff is a little bit differently, but it's this idea that they talk about. It's the data, but then it's the personality of the player. Like, the data could be amazing, but if they're like, that personality does not fit within this group of players that we've got, we won't go for that player. We want the personality as well. And that's why they're so successful year on year, because it's contingency planning, but it's also creating a winning culture. It's creating a culture that has lasted from Felice Mazu to Sebastian Pocagnoli. And you think of all the players and managers they've had in that time, but the culture's never really changed. It's always felt kind of cohesive and everything like that. And that's what they've built, and that's why they're in this position now. That's why maybe not all of us, but every year I go into it thinking, well, they've lost Puertas or they've lost Teddy Tuma. Like, I'm not sure they're going to be able to compete. This year I was like, Pocagnoli, untested manager, I'm not sure they're going to do it. But they prove me wrong. They prove everyone wrong every time because they've built the culture that can stand the test of time. And that's what other clubs need to look at. And I think it's not just on the pitch, it's off the pitch as well. It's with the fan base. It's that connection they have with the fan base and the culture. Like, it's all one big, big thing. And to be fair, I'm not saying Club Brugge don't have that. I think they do have that. They have the winning culture that they've put in. And that's why when it comes to the playoffs, Club are more often than not will perform. Apart from the Antwerp season, gets to the playoffs, they've got the winning culture. They have that belief that they will perform. But Union have come straight up and competed because they've built something that can stand a test of time. And you go into this summer and I think, well, they're probably going to lose X, Y, and Z player, but they'll go side. They'll find people. They might lose Pocagnoli, but they've lost a manager every season and come back again the next year. So it's kind of like, yeah, I feel like we'll obviously talk about this more if they do win the title, and there's so much to talk about. But I want people to look beyond kind of thinking that they do what Brighton do, and that's why they're successful. Like, yes, they do what Brighton do, but they also do it in their own way as well. And that's what Alex said to us, and that's what some people have still questioned that, but I've take it at face value. I believe that that's kind of their approach to things.
I think it's the consistency. As well, the consistency of how well the club is run. We've talked about that a lot, and we'll talk about this probably more, almost certainly. But just to give a really small example of that, a different one that we've never really touched on before. We've seen the turnaround in coaches at Union, which is not a bad thing. It's just been forced upon them by circumstances. Their choices have always been good. Union have this policy of not allowing any manager coming in to bring their own backroom team in as well. So whoever's been T1 has essentially been made to work with a team that have been there for, what in footballing terms now is a very long time. So there's a stability there. People who know everybody at the club and know their roles very well. And it just means that when somebody leaves, there isn't this really important bit of the footballing operations that's ripped out and that they have to start again. So there's this continuity there as well, that I don't think they get the credit for little things. I mean, that's just a little example. I think a very smart thinking that does make a difference. And they've stuck by a coach who had a rocky start, let's be honest. He did. It took him a little while to get to know that squad, to get the best out of them, for people to settle down. And everyone was asking questions at the beginning of the season. Is this the wheels coming off? But they stuck with it, and they've been rewarded for it. And, they have improved year on year. A lot of people recently have been talking about, they're less good to watch than they used to be. I don't subscribe to that view. I think it's a bit different, but different in still a very positive way. I think being maybe a little bit less reliant on 2 or 3 names who are not names at the time, who make a name for themselves when they come to Union over the last few years, but is probably a good thing. And if they do go on to win the title and secure automatic Champions League football, think of the position that puts them in as well, though, longer term. there's a guaranteed big pot of money there, which means they're in a much stronger position to hold on to some of these players over the summer than they would be if that doesn't happen. So, winning the league after 90 years potentially is massive, but there are other things beyond this in terms of where the club goes next and going up another level and developing things that people haven't really touched on yet that are still very, very significant. And obviously they seem to be making progress with a new stadium now, which from a revenue point of view has really positive implications for the club. And then there'll be more money, obviously, if they go on to secure the title. So there's lots of aspects to this, I think, that are getting missed by people that we'll touch on over certainly next week, probably in a lot more detail. But yeah, I mean, any signs of any nerves or jitters at all this past weekend, absolutely not there at all. And I was chatting to Alex briefly after the game, not long after the game, and he sent me a little message. I was talking to him about the performance. His analysis of that 4-0 performance was simply very nice.
And it was very nice indeed. And the things we just talked about, Union, Anderlecht fans are probably listening thinking, like, we've lost that. Like, where is our kind of culture and kind of connection and everything like that? It's just been completely kind of messed around. And like this performance against Club, kind of like Union Club, bang 3-0 by kind of just before half time. Stroikens obviously scores a wonder goal. He's been linked with the move away in the summer. Loads of kind of bigger teams are interested in him. Be very surprised if he's still there next season. But that when like players like that leaving and some of these players leaving, I don't think for Anderlecht they've got the best out of some of these young guys in terms of challenging for the title within their window of kind of opportunity to have them, because the way the Pro League works now and the way this league is happening, it's your window is so tight with some of these young talented players that you get almost a season. And that's what Union have kind of understood. Like, we're going to have this guy for a season, probably. He's really flipping good. We're not going to have him next year. We need to get the next guy ready. And it's just the future planning of Anderlecht has not been great, which makes no sense because they have literally one of the best academies in the country. Like, they have the players there ready to step up that they should be able to produce and bring through. They've got a team in the Challenger League for this very reason. And yeah, I think they're going to become my high-level Leuven, I think we could say, in terms of my frustration with them.
That's brutal.
It's kind of, and I think Anderlecht fans are probably, I think I'm on the same wavelength as them. I think their frustration, it will come down to like Hazy saying he wants to stay. Like, he shouldn't stay. Like that. Let's be honest. This is not the man for the job. He's talking transition. I've heard that word with Anderlecht every summer. Transition. Like, when's it ever going to end? Like, when are we going to be like, no, we're going to compete? Because you've got some experienced older players there, like Vertonghen obviously leaving. Not the best final game in front of the home fans, I think it's safe to say. Going up against Vermaat, Solis and Van Aken in tasty form. Vermaat obviously another goal and assist. Like, what a playoffs he's having. Really kind of cat amongst the pigeons in terms of what's going to happen to him going forward, because he's kind of elevated himself to a position that club probably didn't predict that he would have elevated himself to by this point. To the point where, like Gustav Nielsen, their big summer signing, is coming off the bench, and you're already asking the question, like, what is the future of the striking position there? Solis goal and assist and off at half time. I mean, Solis for me is probably he's easily up there with one of the signings of the season. I wasn't sure how well he'd do. Like, obviously, I saw a lot of him play for Fortuna Dusseldorf from my German side, and he was fantastic for us. And I was like, this guy's good, but is he good enough to be at this next kind of step up? And I mean, he is. Like, it's safe to say he's a really, really electric player. So, club have done what they needed to do. Like you said, Scott, they're kind of already preempting that it's probably not going to be as fun a final day as last season for them and the fans. Title number 20 will have to wait at least another year. But they will beat Antwerp. I'm sure they'll do the job next Sunday. They will do what they have to do. I can't see them dropping points. I think it's like I said about their cultural thing of, like, when it comes down to it, they normally do win these games. It's just this year Union have been so much better than anyone in the playoffs. They have been the best team in the playoffs, and club know what that's like because last year that was them and they won the league. So I'm sure, the disappointment they'll be there for sure, but they'll probably understand. And there's some interesting decisions to make there for them next season that we'll definitely get into kind of maybe next week or going forward. The midfield pair of Onyedika and Yashari, I think you'll be very lucky to keep those two players Obviously, I've heard 40 million Jashari kind of banded around, and knowing club, that's probably what they'll get for him. Onyedika, they'll probably ask for quite a bit as well. Ordonez as well. Like there's lots of players that are probably gonna move on at the end of the season. Couple that won't. So it's going to be a busy transfer window, I think, for them, especially that two in the midfield. Like they have been arguably the best two central midfielders in the league as a pair. Somehow Onyedika went through a game without getting booked, which must be one of the first times I've ever seen him go through a game without getting booked. I'm sure there are probably a couple of tackles where he could have been booked, but hey, that is just what happens. It's weird now, isn't it? Because we've got these two with everything to play for next weekend, but then Anderlecht nothing really to play for anymore. And it's kind of nice that both club and Union are playing sides with nothing to play for. So it's like neither of them have an advantage in that sense. Like for Antwerp, they probably want to rest players for the game against Charleroi, the two-legged affair against Charleroi. For Ghent, they're going to be resting players. We know they're resting players, and we'll get onto that when we talk about their game with Genk. But I remember you obviously watched this game closely, Scott, and you said how easy it was for club and how impressed you were with them and unimpressed you were with Anderlecht, which again, this is Hazi's kind of like chance to show that he is the man for the job. And is he really doing that? Is it just us? Like we've been, the thing is, me and you have been kind of we were skeptical at Hubert, we're skeptical about Hazi. Like maybe they just need to employ us to find a new head coach because we're clearly right about some things.
Yeah, well, as I kind of throw in occasionally, I think we're right about more things than we're wrong about. Our analysis is 8 or 9 times out of 10 pretty sound, I would say, as high as that. I don't mind saying that if I'm honest. I think we do know what we're talking about on most things. This game, interesting. I mean, lots of people, I suppose, were looking at it and thinking, right, can Anderlecht lay a glove on club this time? Obviously, just off the back of the cup final, there was more reason than most to try and go and get a result to get that out of your system. I just felt Anderlecht were clearly a couple of levels below this club side and just really struggled to deal with them. I mean, simple things, you could see the intensity and the speed of thought and the decision making of club all over the pitch was just actually on a different level. Players knew what they were doing. Understood the game plan. Anderlecht, even when they got into good positions in the game, just, making the wrong pass, delaying for too long, just, that uncertainty, that lack of confidence. And ultimately, I suppose that comes back to the kind of lack of quality issue. I mean, Hazi says that he thinks that it's not really about quality, it's more about mentality. Well, I'm not sure how many people actually agree with him, really. There's not a lot of evidence, I think, to really back that up, because when it comes to games like this, big games in the playoffs, where you're playing sides, the top sides, then this is where the quality you do have in your squad actually matters, because it's that you rely on. And it's also at times like that when you discover that you don't really have it. We've talked about Anderlecht being overly reliant on some of the players in their squad who do have some quality, who, when they are playing well, tend to really produce the goods for Anderlecht. But it's been in fits and starts. And yeah, I think there's just there's not enough honesty from Hazi about the extent of the issue there. And Anderlecht are one of 3 clubs, along with Ghent and Antwerp, who've got really big jobs over the summer to reshape those squads to make them genuinely, or what they hope is going to be genuinely competitive in the playoffs next year. And all 3 of those sides, I would argue, have to change their T1s. As part of that process, if they're going to go and do that, because I don't think the T1s, those 3 clubs at the moment, are really the right people to lead that rebuild. If that's the word that we're going to use, that has to be part of the culture change inside these 3 clubs for different reasons. So I wouldn't be in favour at all if I was on the sporting kind of leadership side of things at Anderlecht to extend Besnick's kind of contract, because he said too many things recently that suggest to me that I don't think, with the greatest of respect to him, that he really kind of gets how big the job is. I mean, my view on Anderlecht, to put it quite simply, is I think part of the issue is they're hamstrung by history. We know they're Belgian footballing royalty, nobody disputes that. But I think part of the problem is that that's said too much. I think they need to dial back down on that a little bit and almost do a mini rebrand and try and pretend that that's not the case for a couple of years to try and make some progress. I think that's difficult to do because of the club's culture and history, but I think it's a weight around everybody's neck that just, I think it's unhelpful. It's useful for motivation purposes, but what it tells me is that none of that has helped anybody, either the playing staff or the coaching staff, certainly in recent years, albeit some progress has been made. Obviously, the wage bills come down, the debts come down. They're making some progress in financial terms, but they're not making that much progress on the park yet, and they are going to have another rebalancing, fairly major one over the summer as well. You know, Stroikens will probably go, going into the final year of his contract. If they want to make some money off him, he's going to have to go in the summer. Otherwise, they'll lose him for nothing. They don't want that. Leone's probably going. Similar reasons. Verscharen, everyone seems to have fallen out of love with him, and him with Anderlecht, which, you know, happened ages ago, it feels like, despite a mini renaissance over part of this season. He's probably leaving as well. 3 really big, important offensive players that would need replaced. So Olivier Renard has got a pretty big job in his hands to put a squad together that's going to be decent for whoever's going to be that T1. And I don't think it is going to be Hazy. They've started talking to people already, as we know. It's been ongoing for ages. Just in the last 48 hours, it seems that they've started to talk to a certain Mark van Bommel again, who was ruled out a while ago because they didn't want him to bring in all of his own backroom team, because they felt it would be costly and they weren't happy with that idea. Well, I think they're revisiting that, which is interesting in light of what we were saying about Union having a policy position of saying, no, you must work with people who are here. You might be able to bring in one person, but you can't bring in a whole team with you. So a lot to consider there. Club just won this game, a bit of a canter, to be honest. I think, that 3-1 doesn't flatter them. It could have probably been more, and I think they're probably a little bit surprised by how soft it was in the end. Certainly after the first goal, I felt that Anderlecht's heads went down and they kind of chucked it kind of quite early, which does kind of confirm what Besnick already knew, and that was that the mentality in this group really isn't great. You mentioned Jan Vertonghen, obviously one of 3 big farewells we saw this weekend, along with Toby's and Sven Coombs as well, we will talk about in a minute. Yeah, I think Jan on another weekend would have seen red this weekend, but for the occasion and the nature of it, he didn't get a red there. You can't raise your hands like that. I mean, you 9 times out of 10, that's a red, and it was quite obvious to everybody, I think, that the reason he didn't get a red was because of the occasion. But that aside, what a career he's had. Most capped Red Devil of all time as well. Not to be sniffed at, a real leader. And actually, he's getting married this month. So we wish him well, and we know he's not going to go into coaching by the looks of it, certainly not in a T1 capacity. So if he does go into coaching, it'll be part of a backroom team at some point. I think he's going to take his time to decide what he does next. And knowing Jan Vertonghen being a little bit different, which I think he is, I suspect he might go and do something kind of quite interesting. It might not even be football related, although I'm sure we'll still see him around kind of quite a lot. I do wish he'd retired a little bit earlier, though, because I just think he'd put a little bit too much pressure on himself and on Anderlecht to kind of try and contribute something. I think being the winner, obviously, that he is, I think he wanted to try and just see the season out and get some game time. But yeah, big job ahead for Anderlecht over the summer, and we'll see what they get up to, because that's going to influence everything we say about them in the next few weeks.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think his kind of partnership with Zeno de Bast a couple of seasons ago, I think we've got to give him a lot of credit for being next to him and kind of helping him. And you just know that for Zeno de Bast, that's going to be one of like a really influential part of his career going forward, is having that time spent with Jan Vertonghen. Yeah, he's one of the best Belgian central defenders that's ever played, isn't he? Like, I think we can safely say that. Most caps, like you said, part of that golden generation, a key part of that golden generation. I know people don't like the term golden generation, but it helps us kind of describe the situation and people understand exactly who we're talking about, don't we? I know if you said that in Belgium, you maybe get a different reaction, but for our listeners, yeah, everyone knows that. Him, Toby Alderweireld, obviously his time at Spurs as well, like in the Premier League, he's one of the better players, one of probably the best Belgian defenders that's played in the Premier League. I can't think of many others that have been as good as him. Yeah, what a career! And he came back and he was good for Anderlecht as well. It's not like he came back and was crap. Like same with Alderweireld, they came back and they were good, which is nice to see. And yeah, Lukaku's next. Obviously, he'll be the next one back in at Anderlecht, and he said he wants to come back with some time left on the clock still. So that's a terrifying prospect, that's for sure. For a lot of defences, I think, rather than kind of for Anderlecht fans, because yeah, big run back in the Pro League could be quite a sight. To be honest, I'm very much looking forward to that. But yeah, good luck to Big Jan. Maybe him and Eden can go and do some cycling together. I know that Eden's been doing a lot of cycling challenges since he's retired. He's put on a lot of weight, but is cycling around a lot as well. So fair play to him. But I could see him and Jan doing a nice little cycling trip together. That could be quite cute. You mentioned Sven Kuhns. Let's get to his kind of last game at home. Not the farewell he'd have wanted, but the farewell that he got nonetheless with a 4-1 defeat to Genk. Not much really to say about this one, obviously, because we know where these sides are finishing now. It's kind of done and dusted. There's no European football for Ghent, which is pretty big, really big. They've actually been a mainstay of European football in recent seasons. I think since we started this podcast, they've definitely been in Europe every single time. I don't know how far back we have to go to track that. But obviously, the Conference League coming in was kind of their bread and butter. They were part of that competition for a long time. You could call them Conference League heritage, that's for sure, but they won't be there this year. And if they've already kind of signalled what's going to happen. Players that are out of contract have been told not to train with the A team. Players that they don't like have been told not to train with the A team. So Stefan Mitrovic and Daniel Milesevic have had a falling out. So Mitrovic isn't training. But you're like, should either of them be there next season? Probably not. Peter Gherkin's too big a contract. They want to get rid of him. He's a sort of player, he'd be great for a mid-table team. In the Pro League, in my opinion, he could really do a job in a mid-table, kind of lower mid-table team. But wages are clearly going to be a massive issue with getting him out the door. Why would he want to leave if he's getting paid so well, and he's not going to get paid so well going forward? Same with Mitrovic. They want to get Mitrovic because of his large wages. But again, why would he leave? He's 34. Why did you give him such big wages anyway? Like that, as a signing, it didn't make sense to me. On that, the length of the deal never made sense. Archie Brown and Noah Fadiga. I think Fadiga, it was more of like a fitness thing, isn't it? That they've kind of said, don't worry about training with the A team. Archie Brown, it wasn't actually quite clear. I still don't know how I feel about him as a player. Like, I feel like he gets a lot of hype and there's a lot of interest from like the Premier League, but is it just because he's English? Do you know what I mean? Like, and I feel like I can say it's because I am English, so I can kind of get away with it. Is he that good? Like, as a modern fullback, modern day kind of wing back going forward, I don't think he's that good going forward, and I don't think he's that great going back. So I'm kind of like, well, what is the deal? And if I'm Ghent, I'll just sell him for as much money as I possibly can in the summer because I think it makes the most sense. And it may be something I'm missing. And if people watching have got ideas as to what Archie Brown's really good at, then let me know because I'm all ears. Looking ahead, obviously they've got to try and spoil Union's party. Although Dante Vanze has already come out and said he hopes they win the title, so he can't play. And then I saw a tweet from our good friend, the Flanders Groundhopper, who said that he believes that most people who are going to be on the bus on the way to Brussels will be hoping their team loses. And he says, I can't remember a time where we've gone into a game hoping that we lose, because obviously they don't want club to win the title. That's guaranteed. It's a lot better for them if Union do. But if you're a club fan, you're looking at this team, aren't you? Like, what? We've got no hope. But I just have a horrendous feeling they're going to do something really annoying and just suddenly be competitive for completely no reason because they've got nothing to play for. It feels like a bit of a mess at the moment, doesn't it? We're talking Anderlecht transition. This team's in the like initial stages of a transition. Obviously, with likes of Coombs going, I think we could probably speak for an hour about transfer policy and kind of the strangeness of like not knowing what direction they're actually trying to go in, what their ultimate goal has been. And under Hein, it was kind of like they had that moment, didn't they, where it was like, okay, they've got this really good team together. This team should be able to compete for the league, and it never really did. And then they just sold all of it in that one winter window. And the direction since then has been a bit confusing. For Genk, it's obviously a nice win, but at this point, it's more the disappointment that you didn't get to kind of go into it with the title ambitions. Fink's obviously changing stuff around, looking at some new players, which I think is the right thing to do. I think you're going to have to use the squad a lot more next season when you're in European football, especially playing his style of football as well. It's going to be really interesting to see how they get on with that. But yeah, I think there's probably not too much to say about this one, is there, Scott? I think we know your feelings on the Ghent managerial situation. We know my feelings on the Ghent managerial situation. I think everyone's feelings on the Ghent managerial situation is you need to find someone new. If it's Jonas de Rock, I'm fully behind that because there's a lot of good young players there. And I think he does pretty well with good young players. And I think he did well at Antwerp. I think he was unfairly sacked there, in my opinion. And I think he could do a good job. But who knows what direction they're going to go in.
Well, I think no Europe for Ghent being confirmed is a significant thing. There's going to be a rebuild on and off the park, I would hope. It's actually quite a big job because although downsizing might not be the right word, I think less resources is going to be going into it this way. And obviously I think they're going to try and not approach it the way they have in the past. And that is, selling a lot of the talent or selling all of the talent for good fees and not reinvesting as much of that actually as you should. And there are already some indications that that's the road that they're going to go down, that they're not going to spend. You wouldn't really expect them to. You wouldn't expect many Belgian clubs to, because we've seen, we saw last summer actually, despite record transfer figures coming into Belgian clubs, the amount of money that they were spending to reinvest was really very, very modest. So it wasn't a like-for-like reinvestment, which is probably longer term the wise thing to do, because although things, maybe good financially for particular clubs at a certain point, it doesn't mean it's going to be like that every summer. So I think it's going to take a little bit more time than Buffalo fans think to stabilise the club, probably is the phrase I would use at the moment, and make them properly competitive. Genk won this game ultimately just by allowing the quality in that side to come through in the end. That's what happened. That's what allowed them to turn the game round, and that was the story of so many of their matches throughout the majority of this season. In just finding solutions to the issues in the game, and it was the Genk actually that we saw a lot of before the playoffs that we saw this weekend, which probably isn't a coincidence. Now that they're out of the title race, they're freed up. And I did think that this weekend. I thought it's interesting that they've gone and performed quite well in the way that they were doing coming into the playoffs. Now that intense pressure and spotlight is actually off them, that's not a coincidence. Just a couple of other things on Ghent. I mean, we know how horrendous the playoffs have been for them. Losing 8, winning 1, drawing none so far, conceding 29. And only scoring 3. I mean, absolutely horrendous. But when you look at the regular season, they only conceded 33 over 30 games. So something has happened. Something quite dramatic has happened in that camp in a very short space of time for the bottom to fall out. You cannot say after 9 games, which is a reasonable sample, I think. It's not a lot, but it is a reasonable sample. You cannot say, I think, with any seriousness, we've been a little bit unlucky. We didn't take our chances. The opposition did. We lost some games on the basis of 9 hammerings. 8 hammerings, pretty much. And potentially another one coming up this weekend, depending on the way things go as well. It has the potential to go down that road. If Union go into that game with the focus and drive that they did last weekend, then it very much will be one of those games. I'm glad you mentioned Dante van Zier. Obviously and understandably, he wants Union to win the title as an ex-Union player and as someone who did very well there, still very well remembered and loved for his contribution at Union. He's made it impossible pretty much for Milicevic to play him. I think he will play him. I'd be surprised if he didn't. But when I heard that yesterday, I did think, what are you doing? I know he's just being honest, but he's put his own coach in a really impossible situation there, I think, and just made it really, really awkward. I suppose it becomes even more awkward if he plays and he scores. There's an interesting scenario to throw into the mix, particularly if the first goal this weekend is in the scenario that Ghent score first and it's a certain D. Vanzier who scores. That is a cat among the pigeons moment.
I thought you meant he was going to score an own goal.
Well, who knows? Who knows what could happen this weekend? That's the we should underline that. I'm happy to predict anything, but cease to be surprised by anything anymore. It's one of the delights about Belgian football. It's predictable and not at the same time. It must be a nightmare to be Daniel Milicevic at the moment. He can't be enjoying himself too much. In recent weeks, he's been saying a lot, well, we've been playing reasonably well in big chunks of these games, just not taking our chances. That's what I'm saying about the sample. Over those 9 games, you have to look at that and go, okay, that may well be true, but at the same time, there's enough evidence there to suggest underlying problems that just haven't been addressed. For a whole host of reasons. And equally interesting that 6 players have been told, no, we're dropping you from the A squad. Some of those, probably it's because they don't see them having a future. Some of them, I think it's because the coaching staff are a little bit pissed off with some of those players and their contribution and see them as being part of the issue along the way. So it's a complex picture. I'm just not sure how helpful it is doing that kind of coming into a game like this, but they still have to hopefully go out there and be professional as well. So it'll be very interesting just to see what their starting lineup is like this weekend.
I reckon it'll be quite young, is my opinion. I think there'll be a lot of young players playing. I know that I think one of those players is Andrew Hulslager, who's obviously he's just really struggled with injuries recently. Like he's, for me, one of those players that kind of like a Gherkins. Like if you get him in fit and you get him into kind of like a lower mid-table team, I think he'll have a real impact because he's creative. He's got an eye for goal. Like we saw at East End, he was a very, very good player when fit for that kind of tier of side. So yeah, I hope he can get back to some sort of fitness. And if he does stay in Belgium, I really am looking forward to kind of seeing where he does end up. Again, it'll be a financial thing. He'll have to take less money. But I mean, if you're Charleroi and Dan Heymans lose to join Genk, like maybe you go to get an Andrew Hulsager in there because he can at least potentially contribute some goals and stuff if he's fit. So there you go. There's your kind of top tips for transfers and stuff like that. So yeah, that obviously we've kind of looked ahead to next weekend on Sunday. It all kicks off about 5:30 UK time, 6:30 Belgian time. Another helicopter Sunday. You couldn't really ask for anything more. Like we love a helicopter Sunday. There's again, I was talking about nostalgic football stadiums. There's something about a trophy being stuck in a helicopter and flying around the country. Thankfully, Belgium's so small; doesn't have too far to go. If it has to go to Brussels or to Bruges, it can kind of the holding pattern wouldn't be too far from either single one. Maybe above Ghent, I don't know, but maybe a little bit further to the right. But yeah, really looking forward to it. That's kind of I wish both teams well, and I hope that it doesn't come down to anything controversial. I just hope it's a clean way. Whichever side wins it is won in a clean kind of manner, and there's no controversy. But we can only dream. Cercle Brugge, we've got to speak about them because they're still playing football as well. They travelled to Patro Eisden, the first Stork era, and what is this man putting in the water wherever he goes? I think he brings in his own boots and gives them all different boots, and he's got shooting boots that he brings with us because he goes into Kortrijk, they start scoring goals. He goes to Cercle, they create probably as many chances as they've created all season in every game. Like they created a lot of chances this season, but they just put them all in the back of the net. 5-1 win over Patro Eisden in the first leg. Like that is a statement victory, and any sort of nerves that I had, which makes me sound like I'm biased and don't want Patro to go up over Cercle. Like I'm either one, if whoever wins, it's fine. But I think I was nervous of like they're just going to mess it up when they should on paper be the better team. So I was kind of nervous that they were going to dominate and then lose or something and cost themselves and this project. But if Patro won, fair enough. Like I have nothing against either side or for either side in that sense. But this was like the worst possible team to play at this moment in time with a Bernderstork coming in, because this is like, this man loves this sort of situation. And yeah, some of the goals are really, really good. The Brunner goal, just running off the defender, miles onside, going around the keeper, putting that back in. Like he's shown signs of being a really, really good player at moments, but then there's moments where he makes stupid decisions, and you're like, that's the young player in you that just needs to iron those out, and you can really develop. But he scores twice. Augusto scores. Thibaut Sommers keeps scoring a best career season for him. Which, if you're Thibaut, you're probably like, this is the worst year to have the best career season, because it's just going to be like, oh yeah, it was when we were rubbish and we really, really struggled. But he stepped up, and that's all you can really ask for as a coach. And then Lawrence Agikum, one of those players that they brought in the summer that they had high hopes for, he scores as well. He's started to play a little bit more, and kind of he's more noticeable in recent weeks and stuff like that. But yeah, I think they finished the game with 20 shots, 7 of which were on target. Patro did get one back late on, but yeah, dominant display from Cercle. And I think Patro was saying we're going to give it a go. And this reminds me of who did they play in the qualifiers for European football, where they absolutely spanked them, and then they went back home and they kind of lost by quite a few goals, but it didn't matter because they'd spanked them in the first leg. I'll have to look it up while you're kind of giving your opinions on this one, Scott. But this should be done and dusted at the Jan Bridal. Like there's if Patro come back to win this, something massively has gone wrong for Cercle, and Bergstort will definitely not be there next season if that happens.
I think if that were to happen, then somebody has been doing some voodoo somewhere. And that could be the only possible explanation. I think everybody was expecting this to be a quite cagey, tense affair, because that's how these games tend to go historically. That was not how this one panned out. It was a textbook example of a top-level side playing a side from a division below and actually underlining why they're a top-level side, even if they're one who's had a really poor season and they've been struggling for various reasons. The quality just told in the end. The speed of thought, the intensity, everything was 2 or 3 levels above. And I think what we saw in Patro was a side that are not ready for the Pro League yet. A lot of the questions coming into this game were tactically Patro going to be able to adapt the approach that's worked for them at Challenger Pro League level in order to kind of combat this Cercle side? And the answer, which was quite obvious very early on, was no. I mean, the game was effectively over, I think, after 25 minutes when the second goal went in. I thought, this is done now. It's just a question of whether Cercle want to ram home the advantage and actually kill it in the first leg, which they've gone and done. Patro came into this game looking like they were going to play the way that they've been playing domestically all season in the Challenger Pro League, and Patro are a side who, if you haven't had a chance to watch them, don't tend to like possession that much. Bernstorff was talking about this, a fair bit before the game, describing their style of play, and he's right. They don't tend to particularly like having possession. They like to try and hit you on the break and get the better of you in the transitions. And actually, not only did they not compete in the duels, they didn't really get the better in any of the transitionary play either. So the things that normally they're good at just didn't happen. And afterwards, Steinem was saying that we tried to take advantage of Cercle's lack of confidence, as he put it, which you wouldn't have seen actually looking at that performance. Steinen just bemoaning the fact that they were flat, which they were. They looked certainly more nervous in a way that Cercle didn't, and didn't offer any resistance to them at all. So I think they're just frustrated that they didn't put up any kind of a fight at all, and showed Cercle too much respect. I think the interesting thing, I mean, Stork coming in just a few days before, there was a lot of talk about our Cercle abandoning their footballing principles, and this is definitely another thing we'll come back to after the second leg, because it's looking like Stork is now going to be there beyond the end of the season. That seems to be the arrangement that's been agreed at the moment. That in itself is quite a controversial thing, I would suggest, for a whole host of reasons. He himself went as far as to say, look, the identity is going to change. We will play differently in these games, which they did. They abandoned the style and the template that we know them for, to play, pretty much free-flowing football, which kind of freed them up, I think. He kept things very simple in training this week, and said to them, look, do your thing, be positive, be brave, be instinctive. play forward-thinking football. Don't necessarily, try and approach things tactically in the way that, you have over the last 2 or 3 years. Very interesting conversation for us to have around that, and whether the strategy and profile of the club should be abandoned, even after the point that they save themselves, which I think it's safe to say they've done now. That would be a very risky thing to go into the pre-season and do, I think. It works in this scenario because, it frees players up and it can be helpful. I totally get that. But I think Cercle abandoning those footballing principles are not really the issue. The issue ultimately has been things to do with recruitment and some of the choices around that. We'll come back to that definitely. I mean, I sense there's quite a lot. But I say I sense, I know there's quite a lot I want to say about that Cercle fans probably feel similar to as well, and it raises all sorts of questions around the wider footballing operations inside the club as well. I think if they do decide to kind of go down that road, so winning this playoff and preserving their status is not really a vindication of anything to do with Stork, who I'm not going to be critical about because I actually quite like Bernd Stork. He's a very likeable character. Nothing to dislike about Bernd, really. Actually, his sides don't even play bad football. I think sometimes because of the fact he's seen as Dr. Stork, and he has this pill that he uses that he keeps secret. He doesn't tell anybody the ingredients to, and quite right too, because he's built a career up off the back of this. Sometimes suffers from this reputation of coming in and saving clubs. I don't want to draw comparisons with a certain Sam Allardyce, who in English football had this thing for a while of being seen as the man you go to when you're in the shit, who might be able to get you out. Dr. Stork has seen a bit like that in Belgium, and I actually think he's better than that, to be honest. So in some respects, it could be very interesting to see how he could do with a blank slate at a side at the start of a season. But I think throwing out that baby with the bathwater for Cercle, I think would be a pretty controversial thing to do. So that's something to look out for over the summer, because I think we'll hear a lot more about that. Big post-mortem for them to do after this coming weekend in the second leg. Big post-mortem, big questions about recruitment, big questions to be asked around choices, and also the choices they're going to make over the summer, because that decision coming into the season around we're not really going to invest money, even though they were told that they could. I think there's an argument that says they do need to spend a little bit this summer to help that squad, because I think if they don't, they could very easily have a season identical to this one next year, and they don't want that and can't afford that. So they've got a big summer ahead of them, along with quite a few sides, actually. It feels like a lot of sides this season, more so than any other season for quite a while, for different reasons. I've got massive post-mortems and jobs to do. So it's going to be a more interesting pre-season than most, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, I think more so than last year. I think a lot of teams, just from memory, feel like they've kind of stood pat for a couple of years now. Cercle, obviously, they did bring in players, like we've been saying, but the players weren't good enough. And that's kind of like, some of them are coming slightly better now, but throughout the season they haven't been good enough. And it's the team I was trying to remember, it was Wisła Krakow. Obviously second tier Polish team. They beat them 6-1 in Poland and then lost 4-1 at home. Ended up winning 7-5 in aggregate, but I don't think you want to repeat that again. But that was quite entertaining for sure. I agree with you. I think the Stork decision, I think you're right. I think he'd get an unfair reputation. I think the reputation changes if Kortrijk keep him on at the end of that season that he kept them up. But obviously Vincent Tan was like, I want to sell the club. They didn't know what they were doing. Then they messed everything up, and they obviously Frey Alexanderson comes at the end and saves them. It's like, well, if Stork had been there through that period and stuff like that, like how different would it have been? We don't know. It's just we're going to find out, I guess, is what we're saying. And it's interesting because obviously they've recruited for the style, like that's been their thing. It's like we recruit players that fit this style of play, kind of like Union as well. Like we want to build a cohesive unit and characters and stuff like that, and it doesn't feel like it's been as cohesive and character kind of driven this season. It doesn't feel like what Miron built last year. It doesn't feel like it's really there. I'm still interested to see what would have happened if he'd stayed, and I feel like they probably would have still got out of it. if he'd stayed. I don't think. I think it would have maybe got to the same point, but I feel like even at this point he'd have got them out of it. But they've gone with Stork, and yeah, we've got to give him kind of the opportunity to show us that he isn't just a man that comes in and saves clubs. And yeah, I think the decision they made was just they had to be pragmatic in the situation. They were like, who gives us the best chance of staying in this league? Burn Stork. How do we get him? Okay, we're going to have to offer him the job, like longer term. He's not coming in for 2 games. He's going to want the job for a permanent time. It's like, okay, what's more important, staying in the league or footballing principles? Staying in the league is kind of more important. But you're going to do that. What happens next season? It's really interesting. It's completely in flux. And you're right, they're one of so many teams that we can talk about. At the end of the season, I'm going to do a thing for Get Football. I'm going to kind of try and grade the team seasons. And I think a lot of them are going to have very similar grades and then give them kind of what they needed in the summer. And I think a lot of them are going to have the same thing in the summer. Like there's so many teams in the same situation going into next year that a lot of them will be fighting for the same players. And it's going to be quite competitive in that sense. And then the sides that are coming up, I feel like they're going to kind of push a lot of these teams into having to do some stuff. That's for sure. Like Ralo ambitious, like we know that. We've been speaking to them. We've got a special episode coming out with them. They've got ambitions. They are scouting like crazy. They've got a lot of people watching a lot of football to find their players. Sort of Vargem as well. Like they've got a good team and they're going to be ambitious because they're not coming up. They're not. Those two sides aren't like Dender. Like I feel like Dender came up and they were like, we've got this small budget. We're going to stick with it. We've got Everard, we've got a good coach. Let's just hope that we can stay in the league. They managed to do that with lots of loan players. But I feel like these two sides have a little bit more kind of, we want to become a stable Pro League side, where Dender are like, we'll be happy if we can stay for a bit. Kind of like Sarang came up, if we stay for a bit, great. If we go back down, it's fine. Like we've had a fun ride, we've had a fun go at it. So yeah, don't want to talk too much about next season, but it's going to be quite an interesting one. I think that pretty much does it for this week. We skipped an entire playoffs and still managed to go for an hour, so I think that's pretty good going. There'll be plenty to talk about next weekend, after next weekend as well. Hopefully Joris will be back to give his opinion on whoever wins the title, and hopefully for Cercle fans, they haven't completely bottled this and we're not talking about Patro being in the league next season and then being in the Challenger, because that would be quite crazy. But Scott, as always, it's been a pleasure sharing a moment with you.
It has indeed, and thanks for allowing us to come in your lug holes, everybody. We will see you next week for our own analysis of the big party, wherever that may be.
Absolutely, and that probably will be our last episode of this season, unless we decide to do a catch-up on the Charleroi Antwerp one. We might just kind of put a little thing out about that, but this would be kind of the last major episode of this season, and then it'll be full steam ahead to the pre-season preview for next year and the Challenger pre-season preview as well. A couple of special episodes, as we've already said, with Ral, that might try and we're always trying to get other stuff out there as well, so we'll see what happens there. If you like what we do, please leave us a review on your podcast app of choice. If you really like what we do, please do consider donating to us at Buy Me a Coffee. All the links for that you can find on our social media accounts as well. And yeah, thanks once again. Enjoy the final the final kind of big weekend of the football season in Belgium. I'm sure you'll all be staying tuned to the Helicopter Sunday, and we wish both teams the best and both fans the best. And yeah, hope you will enjoy it, and we'll speak to you very soon on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.